But I want to bring on my guests. I am over the moon to be joined by Dimitri Lascaris. He's a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. In 2020, Dimitri ran for leadership of the Green Party in Canada. How you doing, my man? You doing okay?
I'm doing well, and I really appreciate your very kind remarks. Great to be with you.
Man, I love having you on, and I followed you for a while and do appreciate it. Thank you for joining me. Um, I want to start with the Putin call first, and I want to move to what's taking place in the Middle East. Give me your take. Liberals have been fascinating to me on this issue of Trump trying to restore diplomatic relations with Russia and making real moves in doing so. Like, he's serious about it, or he comes across being very serious about it. They recently had the phone call yesterday. And again, the phone call came across positive. They spoke for 2.5 hours. Give me your take on the moves that Donald Trump is making here. He seems to be genuine with it. Do you think he's going to be able to make progress on it in the way that he seemingly wants to make progress on this against a political establishment that for the last 3 years has been whipped up into a war of fervor, and Europe still is?
Well, I want to be just to make sure I understand your question. When you say, is Trump sincere about these initiatives, are you referring to Ukraine or are you referring to
Ukraine? In this case, I'm referring to Ukraine. I'm saying he does seem sincere. I guess my question is, do you think he's going to be able to make movement on this, considering Europe is doing everything in its power to stop it? There's a political establishment in the United States that does not want it. And Ukraine seems to be going rogue by just attacking the energy structure, which effectively violates the ceasefire that Donald Trump apparently worked out in that phone call. And you get various sectors walking back anything that the U.S. says. We're not going to give up territory concessions. We're not going to give up Crimea. We're going to continue that stuff, despite the fact that Trump and Putin have effectively agreed upon the majority of whatever is going to happen in any kind of deal.
Yeah. I had a discussion with a guest came on my show way back at the very beginning of the second Trump administration. It seems so long ago, where we talked about this very issue. And I think it was Alex Craner, actually. And I suggested to Alex that ultimately Trump's only useful role would be to sign the articles of capitulation.
Right.
And I went on to express the view, which I feel more convinced about now after having seen this circus for 2 months than I was then, that Trump, I think he genuinely wants to bring the war to an end, not because he particularly cares about Ukrainians or Russians. I really don't think he gives a damn about them.
I think,
but there's a lot of money being pumped by the United States into this. The United States and Trump in particular are very concerned about the rise of China. They've been very clear that they want to pry Russia away from China. Mm-hmm. And, ultimately that would, in their view, enhance the whole project of containing China, weakening China. So I think for those reasons, he would like to bring the war to an end. But the problem for Trump, even more so than the deep state, is his own character. Trump is just obsessed with the idea that he's a winner. He cannot be associated with defeat. And there is no way in which you can get the Russians to stop prosecuting this war on terms that do not constitute a defeat for NATO. They've been very clear. You have to accept, you, the West and Ukraine, will have to accept that those 4 oblasts in Crimea now belong to us. You'll have to take Ukraine out of NATO. You'll have to demilitarize the country, and you will have to denazify the country. If they accept those terms, it will be crystal clear to the whole world that NATO has been strategically defeated.
Yes.
And Trump will be the person upon whom they will hang that defeat, and he knows this. So I think
just interrupt for a moment.
Sure,
they will hang that defeat on Joe Biden. Trump, he is going to hang that albatross on Joe Biden. I'm telling, he is not going to accept that that's a defeat. Trump is going to say, well, they wanted to take all of Ukraine, and I prevented it. And he may get some fig leaf from Putin that he is going to run with. It's a defeat for NATO, yes. I agree with you full-heartedly. And I'm sorry to interrupt. I shouldn't have interrupted.
No problem. You're making an important point. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was my point. I'm finished. That was my point.
I know what he'll try. I totally agree with you. I think he will try like hell to say, I'm just here to clean up the mess that Biden created.
Yep.
and this is the best deal we can get. And of course, he'll try to say, we also got some business transactions out of this. American corporations are going to go in there and make a killing and blah, blah, blah. I know he'll try that, but I think he's really struggling because he knows that there's going to be a counter narrative. It's already out there. You can see it. The corporate media and the deep state and the warmongers and the NATO aficionados are all characterizing Donald Trump as a Putin puppet and weak. And just this morning in Canada's go-to newspaper for the political elite in this country, it's a newspaper called the Hill Times. It's kind of like Canada's version of Politico. There's a cartoon by their resident cartoonist, which just makes a complete mockery of Trump, makes him look weak and defeatist and a Putin agent and so forth. And he had to deal with this narrative, Donald Trump, for his entire first administration. He was hammered senselessly with this nonsense that he was a Putin puppet. And I think he's mortally concerned about this. And it's really, he's kind of flailing around right now. He's trying to find a way to get the war stopped, at least on a temporary basis, but without making any meaningful, serious concessions to Russia, because he's made none. He's talked a good game, but what has he actually conceded? Has he come out and said, we are prepared to commit in writing, in a formal treaty, that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO? He hasn't said that. He's made, assurances. He's given verbal assurances, but he hasn't actually committed in writing in a legally enforceable way to do that. And of course, when it comes to recognition of these territories, rather than saying outright, yes, we will recognize your jurisdiction over these territories, he keeps saying both sides are going to have to make territorial compromises. And Russia's been very clear they're not making any. So my personal view, Jamarl, is that he's kind of flailing around. He's caught between a rock and a hard place. And at the end of the day, I think what's going to happen, sad to say, is that this war will be continued to be prosecuted until a total military collapse and a regime change in Ukraine. And then no one will have any choice about it at that stage.
I can see where you're coming from. I can see that. I don't think at this stage where they haven't even begun negotiations, like in the real sense of the word, of having people sit down and, prosecute what they're trying to accomplish. And I don't think you're going to get that stuff from a president without that process. I don't think the Russians even expect that at this point. So I do accept that. Fair enough. I agree there's a counter narrative that's taking place. There's a scene in Game of Thrones where this little one, I can't think of his name, but he tells them the bastard, like they call him the bastard. And he says, you own it and you turn it into armor. Like you own that stuff. Donald Trump was hit with that stuff for 4 years straight, even to the point of them trying to take down his presidency. I don't think he cares. I don't think he cares what Europe thinks. I don't think he cares what Canada thinks. He is mocking the hell out of Canada right now. Governor Trudeau, in the way that he was calling it, said Trudeau came there and cried, meaning he has berated European leaders and Canadians for the entire 3 months or 2 months he's been in office. I don't think he cares about what Canadians and Europeans think. When J.D. Vance was talking to Maria Bartiromo, and he was talking about taking Greenland, and he was like, Europe will scream, we don't care. He said it flat out, we don't care what Europe thinks. We're taking Greenland. I'm saying I accept that the counter narrative is out there. I don't think he cares. He has had to deal with that for the last several years. What Trump cares is, what does his base think? What does America thinks? And what his base says is he should just walk, meaning they don't even want him to negotiate. That's where they are. So whatever he gets out of Ukraine, they would accept, they would approve. The counter narrative be damned. So that's the political context in the United States. And within that context, as you point out, he doesn't care about Ukraine. I think he wants to leave it. He considers it Joe Biden's mess. And if he has already, in theory, agreed with, okay, political territory. And by the way, we don't know what Putin ends up with as the Ukrainian military gets weaker. There may be areas where he's like, yeah, you can take it back, but we're keeping this. This is part of the Russian Constitution. This other stuff, okay, fair enough, you can take that. And Donald Trump can run away with saying, okay, I stopped Putin from taking all of Ukraine, which was never an objective, by the way. It was something that Europe said was an objective. That was never true. It was purely propaganda. He can take the propaganda, though. He can live in it. And he can say, I stopped them from taking all of Ukraine. Yes, Putin is getting these areas, but I stopped him from taking all of Ukraine. And maybe we can make deals around other stuff, around issues with NATO. I agree with you, but I think I'm more cautiously optimistic. I'll say it that way.
Okay. So I have a question for you. And I
Yes.
know this is your interview, and I'm sorry to sound
No,
like
please, ask, go for it.
but and your perspective is entirely plausible. I mean, we're kind of trying to understand what's going on in the
Yeah.
head of the orange-haired man, which is challenging
Right.
ask in the best of circumstances. But how do you explain the fact that Trump is continuing to arm Ukraine and provide it to battlefield intelligence? If the man didn't care, he would. It seems to me he would just cut all of that off and bring this sucker to an end right now, because that's what would happen, and he could still claim, I stopped them from taking all of Ukraine, because at this stage, Russia would not be advancing on Odessa. It wouldn't be advancing on Kharkov. It wouldn't be advancing on Sumy. It would take the 4 oblasts in Crimea and call it a day, assuming they also agree to no NATO membership and demilitarization and so forth. He could make all of those claims, but he's not doing what's necessary to bring it to an end and stop the killing, which is to end the military supplies and the provision of intelligence to Ukraine. So what is your view about why he continues to do that?
Because you want chips on the board. If the Ukrainian military collapses, that's it. Like, also, while I don't think he entirely cares about Europe and Canada screaming that Trump gave the farm away, if you do that, they're going to say Trump's fault. Even in the US, they would say Trump's fault. Trump stopped the weapon shipments. Because do you remember when the Republicans, I think they were in a debt fight, and they refused to give Joe Biden the money for more weapons to Ukraine? I think it was for like a month or two. And all of the headlines were like, Ukraine is failing because the Republicans aren't giving them weapons and money, despite the fact they were just getting beat on the battlefield. The same refrain will come out of the US, and they would just say Trump walked away. Because what if he does that? That is considered him just walking away. That's not him getting a deal. That is him walking and flailing out on Ukraine. I think that from his point of view, A, he wants to look strong. B, I agree with you. A U.S. president doesn't want to look weak, despite the fact that they've been beaten. Like NATO has lost in Ukraine. There's not much you can do with that. You're stuck with that. And so he is trying to look strong in the context of that. I think that as a U.S. president, it is hard to do that. I really do. I think he wants a negotiation and wants it to come to terms, and believes that if he stops shipments, A, he's going to get blamed, and B, the Russians going to take it. Like, I don't know. Look, I agree with you, right? I want him to just stop the weapons, just call it a day, just walk. I'm sick of this, right? End this war, resume diplomatic relations. But I do think you have to work between the lines as a U.S. president. And it's not like the support and intelligence has helped them win a war. They fundamentally lost it, and they're getting weaker on a 2,000 kilometer front. And they're getting routed and cursed. And the entire world sees it. They've lost.
Yeah, all I'll say in response is that he would still have leverage, even if he stopped the provision of weapons and intelligence. He would still have sanctions. And that means something to Russia. It's not like it's meaningless. Yes, they've managed to cope with it, but I'm sure they'd much prefer not having sanctions on them. And so he still has leverage. He can still extract some kind of benefits from Russia. He doesn't have to continue prolonging this war, prolonging the killing, and continuing to, there is a risk that this will escalate at any point in time. Things can get out of hand. It's very dangerous what he's doing, and it undercuts his stated goal, which is to stop the killing. Yeah. The more weapons he gives, the more intelligence, the longer the killing will go on, and the more territory Ukraine will lose. So I hope you're right. I would love to see all of this. Maybe he's got some master plan, and this is the best that he can do in the circumstances. And ultimately, it will bring the war to an end sooner rather than later. But I just don't see that any real progress is being made, Jamar. What they came out of their 2.5-hour conversation with yesterday. Okay, we're going to stop attacking Ukraine's energy grid for 30 days. Big deal. I mean, big deal. That's not going to accomplish anything in terms of bringing this war to an end. Yeah, it's a fig leaf. It is. And Ukraine violated it immediately. It's just violated immediately. Yeah. Like, just making a statement. We don't agree with this process. We're not on board for this. Yeah.
But yeah, just an experiential show of distaste, right? Um, yeah, that's just wow. I woke up this morning, I read it's like Ukraine has violated the minimum limited ceasefire that they agreed upon. Oh
But I
man,
think
there's
this is exactly why giving them weapons and intelligence is wrong.
bad idea.
It's the wrong approach because they don't have any incentive to. As long as they're getting weapons and intelligence from the U.S., why should they respect even that puny little ceasefire? You
Yeah,
know, the only thing they really care about is give us the money, give us the weapons, give us the intel, and then they'll do whatever they want as long as they have that assurance. And Trump has given them that assurance, unfortunately.
I guess the question is there a consequence for them breaking the ceasefire? I mean, does Trump even acknowledge it? And if he doesn't, this kind of gets the Russians' point of, okay, how can we trust you? Like we agreed upon a 30-day ceasefire. Zelensky agreed upon it, and they violated it immediately. How can we agree with and deal with you in these terms? And just to change over to another